It will be live as soon as it's done. And there we are.
All right, it's 7 o'clock on March 8th. I'd like to call the regular scheduled Town of Allentown Planning and Zoning Commission.
Took a minute.
We good?
Yeah.
Do I need to start over?
No.
All right. Call the meeting to order. I have everybody state their name. Present, Scott Davidson.
Steve Stefanski, Joe Dumperly, Brian Luciano,
David Neiman.
Juliette Hodge.
Tricia.
Pat Ray.
Thank you. We're not going to see anybody. We got a full board this evening. Next would be the public hearing. So I'd like to, the instructions would be just come to the podium. You get a 3-minute speech. Once everybody's gone through, you can come back up for a second time, but we're limited to 1 3-minute speak at the first part of it. John's going to do a presentation. And I do ask that everybody please put your phone on vibrate.
Okay.
John, you have the floor. So if anybody wants to compare to see the regs.
I'll put them up on the screen. Sue, could you enable screen sharing?
Let's see.
Okay, well that's getting started. I just briefly introduce myself for folks I haven't met in the room. My name is John Guskowski. I am a professional planner. I am the town's consulting director of planning and development. I've been working with Voluntown for the past roughly 1.5 years or so on a number of zoning and development issues. And since that time, the state has legalized recreational adult use cannabis for sale and consumption in Connecticut. And part of the way that the law was written was that the specific regulation, prohibition, or allowance of cannabis facilities in every municipality was the decision of that local municipality, either through planning and zoning or by town ordinance. And so it fell to planning and zoning. Sue, I don't know if it's still disabled. The Planning and Zoning Commission, as the land use rule maker in Voluntown, faced a choice and basically had 3 basic lanes or 3 basic options that they could take in dealing with recreational adult use cannabis facilities. And again, this is not about people using cannabis, privately in their home, or cannabis being allowed in town, because that is allowed. It is part of the state law. But when it comes to the specific land use of facilities, which is to say a retail facility for the sales of recreational cannabis or a microcultivator for the growing of recreational adult use cannabis, that is a local planning and zoning decision. And so this is not about whether or not you like cannabis, but whether or not those specific facility uses are appropriate in any individual town, in this case, obviously, Voluntown. And so as I was saying, there are 3 basic lanes that the town could take here from a planning and zoning perspective. The first is basically outright prohibit, and a number of communities have done this, to basically say we are not interested in cannabis as a facility land use. We are not interested in retail operations. We are not interested in manufacturing or growing of that. And so that could be put in place in the regulations. The second option is to do nothing, is to not change your regulations, not address it at all. And in that case, the state guidance is that cannabis facilities would be treated as basically any other facility in that category. So in the case of a microcultivator, which is essentially a greenhouse for growing cannabis, would be treated as a greenhouse for growing any other crop. And in a town like Voluntown, which is rural and agriculture friendly, that would be basically allowed as of right on any piece of farmland. And similarly, a retail operation, if the town did nothing and put in place no regulations at all, a cannabis retailer would be treated as any other retailer and could be placed in a retail facility, like somewhere in the village center, like the Riverside Plaza, could be a spot where it would be allowed, just like any other retail use would be allowed. The third lane, which is the one that planning and zoning has chosen to go down in this case and is now before you in public hearing, is to allow a couple of categories of use, but with a series of regulations to ensure that those uses do not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhoods or the community in general. And in that way is very similar to the way municipalities have treated package stores. Obviously, in the case of Voluntown, that package store near the school has been there for a long time and wouldn't be subject to the separation distances. But the way that if you're writing a new regulation for a use like that could come to town, would be to put in place a series of regulations such as separation distances, minimum acreages, and a review process, which in this case is proposed to be a special exception or special permit process, to make sure that the very specific individual user who wishes to put in a growing facility or a retail operation checks a whole bunch of boxes to make sure that they are not having an undue negative impact on the neighborhood or the town in general. So that was the path that this Planning and Zoning Commission has chosen. And the regulations towards that end are actually relatively straightforward. There is a section that discusses the purpose, section 18.1, and this is on the screen if you can see this right now. That basically it states that the town is interested in allowing for a comprehensive review and appropriate citing of cannabis establishments, and to ensure, as I said, the establishment is in harmony with and will not have a detrimental effect on the surrounding area, and that both the operation and location of such establishment is protective of public health and welfare. So in other words, these facilities would only be allowed if the Planning and Zoning Commission was convinced that it would not generate significant negative externalities as a use. And now to reinforce the fact that this is not about people using cannabis, which you may believe or may not believe has negative externalities. This is for the use of selling it or the use of growing it. So, for instance, you might be opposed to people drinking or using alcohol, but is there a negative externality that's associated with the package store itself, or a microbrewery itself, for instance? So there's a separation there. Next, in the regulations, again, the proposed regulations, we have a number of definitions of terms, and these are basically drawn from the state statute itself that defines these terms: cannabis establishment, hybrid retailer, cannabis retailer. The difference between a retailer and a hybrid retailer is someone who sells both adult use recreational cannabis and adult use medical marijuana. There are cultivators, microcultivators, and in the case of microcultivators, we are talking about a growing facility that is less than 2,000 square feet. I'm sorry, between 2,000 and 10,000 square feet. Again, this is a greenhouse of that size would be considered a microcultivator. And then there are producers and project manufacturers and project packagers. These are all definitions that are drawn from the state statutes. In the case of Voluntown, the two categories of uses that we are proposing for again, special permit authorization would be cannabis retailers, and those would only be allowed in the village district and the village commercial overlay district, the major development district, which are geographically limited areas of town and subject to a number of very specific criteria. They shall not be within 500 feet of any other cannabis establishment, not within 500 feet of a licensed daycare facility, church, public playground, or public or private school in existence at the time of the special permit application, when measured in a direct line between any part of the premises and any part of the other use. So there is separation distances, keep it away from churches, keep it away from schools, parks, playgrounds, etc. The exception to that is if the cannabis retail facility goes into a location that meets one of those criteria, and then, a year later, someone opens a daycare center next door, the cannabis facility is not required to leave because they were essentially there first. Sets hours of operation that are similar in many ways to package store regulations, not earlier than 8, not later than 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and between 10 and 6 on Sunday. No on-site cannabis, so it's similar to you don't let people sit on the stoop of the package store and drink their alcohol. People aren't using in the facility itself, and then signage should be appropriate to both local regulations and state regulations. The state did put in effect some regulations that prohibited certain types of signs that overtly promoted the use of cannabis, and the town would comply with those. A couple of things that would need to be submitted to the town, as I said, the burden of proof would be on the applicant to demonstrate that they would not create negative externalities. And in order to prove that, they would have to submit pieces of information along with their application that talked about hours of operation, security and access to make sure that no minors would be accessing the property, the signage to be installed, odor monitoring and mitigation to make sure that you're not creating a funky cloud of cannabis in the area, as well as traffic, parking, and circulation. And again, all of these requirements must be submitted and reviewed by the commission to ensure that these facilities are appropriate and not creating a negative situation. Similarly, the other type of cannabis facility that the town is considering allowing would be microcultivators. And for these, again, this is a growing facility between 2 and 10,000 square feet. We put in effect a minimum parcel size of 5 acres, so these need to be on big parcels. All growing conducted within an enclosed building, so a greenhouse. The licensing shall be obtained from the state. That they have a minimum separation distance from all residential structures in existence at the time of the regulation. So again, you place your facility in the middle of a 5-acre parcel, draw a 1,000-foot radius around, and make sure that you're staying away from all houses in that area that, again, were there at the time of permit. As well as that could be increased if there is some prevailing winds and some odor dispersion analysis that show that neighbors nearby, with more than 1,000 feet, might be negatively affected. Again, no cannabis consumption on site and signage appropriate to state and local regulations, with the same requirements for submission that demonstrate to the commission's satisfaction, again, after a public hearing process, that odor, parking, traffic, security are all appropriate and not creating problems for the community or the neighborhood. The rest of this is relatively straightforward language that special exceptions are contingent on continually having approvals and licenses from the state. That there are some extensions, if there's some offset between a lapse in a DCP permitting and local permitting, so that things can be maintained. And the state licensing has to happen first. The thing that we did not spell out here in the regulations is just a bookkeep or basically an organizational thing that we're establishing tables of uses for each of the zones. And so if this was allowed, the appropriate annotation would be added to the village district area, village commercial overlay district, rural district, and major development district to reflect the level of permitting. So basically, these regulations would be codified and promulgated throughout the regulations to make them logistically consistent. So that is the proposal. Again, it is not about taking a stand on the use, anyone's decision to use. It is merely a reflection on the fact that this is now a legal use in the state of Connecticut, and the town has to decide how it will treat these proposals to actually have facilities in town. So that is what I've got to share, and I'm happy to answer questions if people have specific questions during the public elements of the hearing.
Can I add one thing to that, John? So there was, I don't know if anybody knows, but there was a survey that was sent out. The reason that the board chose to go down the road of regulating this was because the survey was for it being regulated versus not being regulated, and not for prohibiting it. So that's why it brings us to this public hearing, was because the feedback from the town at the time was to promote this.
How was that survey done?
That survey was put out through the town website, was also put out. Was it
Email letters
email
and
and
you just,
Facebook?
know,
So it was
publish
put
on
out.
Facebook, the website,
I don't have
website.
Facebook.
I don't either, but it was still,
I don't check.
It was in the newsletter.
yeah, but it came, yeah.
I can, if you give me a second, I can bring up the current survey results.
What it was put out in a survey to start this. This wasn't just a decision of the board. This was put out. This was put out in a survey to the taxpayers in the town of Arlington.
I can tell you, I didn't get.
Great. Are you guys we have a sign up sheet for the email newsletter that goes out every month. If you want to sign up for that, you'll get, we send it right through email and you get all the stuff going on in town. So.
It's okay. And I also want to make one more note that this is not a vote for the taxpayers. This will end up coming for a vote. It's a public hearing and it will come for vote before the board. Just so everybody understands, you don't get a vote here tonight.
But we are looking for your opinion
We're looking for input.
and input.
It is not for you guys to vote on tonight.
So if I might, I put up on the screen the current results. There were 376 responses, which is almost 15% of the town. That's actually pretty good for a survey of this type. This was on SurveyMonkey. The two questions that they're basically a single question about how to address these uses. And it was, how should the town manage recreational cannabis establishments? And basically micro-cultivators and retail dispensaries, which are the two options that we have on the table right now. The green is generally allow, the yellow is allow, but with regulations and limitations on location and extent, and the red is prohibit entirely. So if you basically combine the two categories of people saying it should be allowed under certain circumstances, you have basically over 70% of the town in both cases saying that it ought to be allowed under certain circumstances and not prohibited entirely. Again, it's not unanimous by any means. And as the chairman said, this is not a referendum being voted on this evening. This is a decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission, but after the appropriate public hearing process.
I would like we're good, John? I'd like to open the floor up to citizens' comments. Please come up to the podium, state your name, and speak your piece.
Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Iavino. I live on Rachel Lane. I've been in this town for 18 years now. My biggest thing is I'm a retired police officer, and I don't care what anybody tells you that it's not a gateway drug. It is a gateway drug. Okay. We start allowing this in our town, it's going to open up the door to other things that we're going to wish we never had in this town. It's going to bring traffic into this town. It's going to bring people into this town. It'll increase crime in this town. Okay, look at the studies, it will do it. And I don't think we're a small community. I believe, everybody that I know that lives in this town loves living in this town. And I just think that, from my standpoint, I definitely don't think that we should even bring this the smallest amount into this town. So I would be definitely against it. And if you need anything from a law enforcement side, showing what it does and how it will increase, crime, you can get it from your local troopers, but I'll also get it from my end as well if you want it. Okay?
Just out of curiosity, nay on both growing and selling. Gotcha.
Everywhere you drive where there is growing,
Yes.
you can't drive by that without just that smell.
Oh,
It's a nauseating smell unless somebody uses it. I don't give a shit what anybody, sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I don't care what anybody, does on their own time. That's not why, I'm yay or nay for it, but it's, when you drive by a growing facility, it's a putrid smell. And before you know it, it'll be stinking up a town on this end of the town. It'll be over here, it'll be over there, and we'll just be like every other town out there that's doing it, and it just becomes a shit show. Thank you.
I also want to make one more point that we are recorded and this is being put on public television. So.
I do apologize.
No, I just want everybody to be aware.
That known,
I follow you.
first of all, I don't think that a lot of
Name and
people.
address.
Oh, yeah, my name's Thomas Monroe. I live on Route 49. I've had a lot to do with marijuana. Even when I was a little kid, I used to love this stuff. But these people that make these laws, first of all, we're too close to the Rhode Island border. That's going to be a problem. Second, if you grow it, you have to have people that process it. The people that process it are in there like 8, 10, 12 hours a day. They're handling it, they're packaging it. Then they get in their car. They're stoned to the bejesus just because they've been in contact with it. And if you don't think they are, I'll guarantee you they are. And if it's a place where they're selling it, now they're also cooking it, making cookies, making brownies, making gummy bears. And at the end of an 8-hour shift, they're stoned to the bejesus too. Are they getting the shuttle bus back home or are they driving down the road? I don't know. I think they're driving down the road personally, because I've seen them leave. They're stoned to hell. It's your call. I'm not going to go for it because first of all, you're too close to Rhode Island border. You do not have a police department. You're all dependent upon the state police. By the time they get here, depending on what their situations were, you don't have any law enforcement. You do, but you don't. By the time they get here, it's too late. So my answer to you guys or whoever wants to go, not a good idea. Thank you. Let's go.
Cheryl Martel, Beechview Road Extension. My concern is that if we could have that here and save one person's life that isn't gonna buy that crap off the street, we've done our job. We all know the fentanyl is going to everything. People are losing their children. Well, if it's legal, why not? Would you want to take the chance? I say, no, you can't go into town and get it. You need to get it off the street. I'm a caregiver for a medical marijuana person. I go and pick it up. That's my job because the person works 6 days a week. There's a little smell when you walk inside. It's a one in Montville, clean, spotless. People are friendly. You do what you got to do and there's no issue. 90% of the people are older than me that are in there. So my vote would be yes. Because my grandson is growing up in here in Balltown, and I'd like to see him continue growing. And the extra tax base would be okay.
Thank you. Anybody else?
the tech becomes the tax base. Skip Olton, Tucket Turnpike. This town is always struggling to keep our mill rate low as possible. And it goes up every year. This is a rare opportunity where we have something new that can be brought into town that is going to help the town. Now, yes, there are a lot of pros and cons, but this is not yet legal federally. But the signs are there that this is going to be legal everywhere at some point. And it makes sense to me that we get ahead of it and we do legislation. Sorry, we're not doing ordinances here. We're doing planning and zoning regulations that we get ahead of it and we start planning how it gets rolled out here. Because if we say no to it, we're going to get left behind. If we do nothing, then as John described, it's going to be basically no regulation whatsoever. So let's get ahead of it and put some regulation in place so that we can control it. So yes, thank you.
Joe Miller, Congdon Road. I agree with retired officer Iavino that it is a gateway drug. And so that's why I'm against it being retail in the town. But I think it would benefit the farmers in town if they had an alternative for another cash crop with the price of milk, everything that a lot of our farmers rely on now. They're not making any money. Is this another option for them? It may prevent a couple farms from being sold to developers. You can see that there is a desire to come into Volatile. The new house is on Brown Road. As soon as they're finished, they're being sold. So if a small farm or one of our larger farms decided to break off pieces for development, you can see the trend is to come into Volatile. I think if you use it just for manufacturing, give them that option. You don't have the traffic, it's just your employees coming into town. You don't have the people coming in from Rhode Island. You're not clogging up the village district. So as far as retail, I would be against it, but for manufacturing, I would support that. And I just have one question because I don't understand. With the current proposed regulations, what is the village district? What is the overlay? And with your 500 feet points, would that allow a retail establishment to come into the center of town here?
John, you want to answer?
Sure. Let me see if I can bring up a zoning layer. Yeah. All right. Hang on.
That's not it.
All right. So here's the town zoning layer right now. Let me give you an aerial photo underneath, so that might be easier to help identify stuff. No, that's not helping. Okay, so basically where you are right now in town is you're right there in the village district. This is right here is the town hall property on Gates Street. You're in the village district, which extends basically out past Beachdale Road, almost to Denison Brook. That is the village district. Then there is the village commercial overlay, which extends beyond, and it goes up basically just past Route 49 to the cemetery over here, and then a little bit on the south side of 138. And then there's also currently one major development zone down there, which has to do with, I believe, an egg laying facility or a poultry facility. That's sort of industrial agriculture. So everything basically in white would not be allowed for the retail. It would be allowed for micro cultivators, again, given a 5-acre minimum. And then as far as separation distances, from schools and churches. Obviously, we know the school is over here. And there's a couple of churches along Main Street and Church Street. 500-foot separation distances basically pushes you out down here to the commercial overlay, down is that Route 49? And out towards the commercial end of the spectrum over here. Basically, this is the Riverfront Mall over here. Would be away from, at least 500 feet away from the center of town.
Do you have a map that kind of shows that? Like,
I
the
didn't
radius
map out.
of
I didn't map out because I didn't have a location of all of the daycare centers or facilities like that. But if you want, we could do a quick. We know that this is the school. I can do a
right.
500-foot abutter of the school. And if there are maybe churches like farther over here, I think there's a church down here somewhere. So it would,
There is right
bleed
there
out,
for your.
yeah, would bleed out this way. So this is 500 feet of the school. Is this the church? This would be 500 feet of the church. So you basically, once you get past Beachdale Road, it starts to become more allowable by that mapping. Unless I'm missing some sort of daycare center or other category.
Yeah, and then of those that are remaining, do we know which are vacant?
No, but it doesn't, vacancy doesn't necessarily matter, because something
No,
could be
that's-
converted.
I mean, yeah, not houses is actually what I meant.
Right.
If there's one, you can't have another one within 500
Ex-
feet. That would
right.
probably take up one for the whole area.
And it's also, I would also note that the state had initially, and it's actually still working on Department of Consumer Protection guidelines about density of facilities. Because you may know that currently package stores can only be permitted in town, one per 2,500 population. So until Voluntown grows another 2,500 people, you will only have one package store. The Department of Consumer Protection is working on similar regulations for cannabis facilities, such that smaller towns would not get overwhelmingly inundated with a number of these things. But those rules aren't finally in place at this point. Does that answer the question? Sort of.
Joe, does that answer your question?
Yes, yep, thank you.
And I had one other question. If there's a church, that's right on the border, right, of Griswold. Justice, is it in Voluntown or is it in Griswold?
No, it's in Voluntown.
It's in Voluntown.
If it was, say it was in Griswold, with that 500-foot radius.
Oh. I think it would apply. I think we don't specify where it is relative to town line.
Okay.
There's another church on Beach Pond Road.
Yeah, that's
That's way
way,
down
way
there.
out.
I mean, it might be interesting just to see, where ultimately we could even have any.
But it's not. It's basically the core of the village center, where the school is, where town hall is, where Church Street is. That area is out.
Anybody else have any?
That's okay. All right, Kim Martell, Beachview Extension. I understand a lot of people think weed is a gateway drug. We can all argue that till we're blue in the face. But whether we want to admit it or not, we have a fentanyl problem in town. We have drug problems in this whole area, which means you have people that are moving here or coming here and selling drugs, whether it's weed or big drugs. The weed can have fentanyl or other things in it. It's happening. If we have the legal means to where there's a dispensary, it's going to chase the drug dealers out of here because there's not a market for them anymore. You're not giving them consumers because the consumers are going to go where it's legal, where it's regulated, where they know what they're getting. Yes, where it's clean. I think that being able to have a dispensary here, medical and recreational would be great. I'm sure there are plenty of senior citizens in this town that have their medical card that have to go all the way to Montville. And there's a lot of people that don't have a medical card that still would like to go. That's 3% tax that we would get from what I understood from Montville for Voluntown per sale. That's gonna add up. We want to do all of this stuff out here for the kids, because I saw it on the website. They want to do a recreational place and expand the basketball courts. Where is this money coming from? Yes, it's us taxpayers, and I'm more than happy to pay. But if we can bring another income in that could potentially benefit the town, why not? We need to, times are changing. It's time to change with those times. Voluntown has been a rural town for, well, I was born and raised here. So I know it's very rural, but let's change a little bit. I'm not saying everyone should be growing weed. I'm not saying we should have a dispensary on every corner. But why not jump at the opportunity to possibly make the community a safer place, bring in more money, and do all these expansions and be the town that the community knows we are. So I say yay for all of the above.
Thank you.
Jackie Dietrich, Bennett Circle. I'm against it, but that being said, it's here. Mostly I would be concerned about, and I don't have my glasses, so I can't really see it, but there was something in this paperwork or the meeting that happened prior about if a greenhouse is already established, they can expand to a certain size within a certain time frame. And I guess I would be concerned about how quickly that could happen. I would want to monitor it for a little bit longer just to see how it goes. I think it was like 6 months or a year. If they're already established at 500 square feet, they could grow to 26,000 square feet, or so. I'm not sure about the numbers there. There was something like that. That would be a concern of mine, just till we see what was going on. And I don't know if Joe Miller meant he was, okay with I kind of agree for the farmers that producing the cannabis could be a benefit to the town, but I'm also concerned about the manufacturing part of it. Someone was telling me about an article about how microbreweries are giving off fumes that are causing homes to have to pressure wash and redo their roofs very quickly because of how they're being, I don't know what's happening there exactly, but so I think with the product manufacturer, or I'd be a little bit concerned about that. Thank you.
Richard Fedor, Wiley School Road. I just think that by allowing the cannabis into town, any revenue would be eaten up by enforcement and quality of life issues. I really don't see it as a gain, and I would probably have to go against it. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Can I pop back up for a quick question?
As long as everybody's gone once.
And that's why I'm asking.
Nope.
I'm sorry. Okay, just a minute. No rush.
Trevor Bills, Turkland Hill Road. Not a big favor of usage, but I think if we miss the opportunity of the income into this town, it's going to be a loss. I mean, it's going to come in anyway. Doesn't matter where it comes from, Rhode Island, or if it comes from the drug usage and drug problems are going to come in. I think if we can regulate it and control it in town, I think that we have a better chance of profiting from it and then controlling what the outcome is.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Just real quick. So when you vote on the regulations, is it an all or nothing? Because a lot of people have said they're for growing, but against retail. So I'm just asking the commission on that.
The commission can modify. on recommendations from the town. Where we can vote as a whole. So it still can be modified at this point. Correct, John?
Yes, so yes, the zoning regulations could be modified on the fly in a way that would make them more conservative or more restrictive. You could not, as part of this public hearing, say, all right, in addition to these two things, we're gonna allow 4 other types, because the public came out in favor of it. You're not able to do that. You would have to have a separate public hearing for that. But if in this case you wanted to adopt, for instance, just micro cultivators and not retail at this time, that's a decision you could make on the fly. But you would have to, so in that hypothetical, so if you wanted to allow micro cultivators but not retail, you would then have to have a subsequent application and public hearing, most likely to prohibit outright retail, because that would be an affirmative action of the board. Leaving retail off of this approval would essentially throw it into that that second track that I described at the beginning, which is not regulating. It would be treated as any other retail use that's allowed in town. So it would, if you wanted to approve one and not the other tonight, you would probably have to have a subsequent public hearing.
The other question that I would have is we have a moratorium on now, and when does that moratorium expire?
The moratorium expires at the end of March. And just while I have the floor, the one thing I would point out, just so the public is aware of this before the commission goes into deliberations, and I believe I shared this with the commission prior, is that we did send the draft regulations to our town attorney, to Rich Roberts, and he came back with just a couple of minor typographical adjustments. His edits are in red, so he changed the reference to the general statute slightly. He added the word "that is" in the beginning of microcultivator, and then had changed the word where we had herein, he changed it to elsewhere in these regulations, and referenced any other applicable state regulations. So he had a couple of technical edits that didn't amount to anything substantive, that if the commission wanted to act on tonight, I would encourage taking a look at Rich's changes as part of any approval.
Any other citizens have any comments?
Okay, go ahead. You're
Nope,
first.
not for you.
Already went,
Okay.
good.
Valerie Moscano, Beach Pond Road. So as a teacher, I do have several concerns. I do teach high school. So I see this every day. I see kids coming into my class high. I see kids that are taking stuff laced with fentanyl. I get it, right? We have scares all the time of what did this kid just get into. Some of the usage comes from the ability to access this drug. Many kids that I see, if they can't get their hands on it, they're not going to be, they'll use it at a party, but they're not going to use it regularly if they can't get their hands on it. And so in our school, we have some kids who are old enough or have parents to get their hands on it, and they spread it around the school. Right now, our kids that are in high school that are going over and getting dropped off at the elementary school don't have as much access to it in town. They would have to get it from school or get it from Montville or someplace else. I just think that if you start bringing that into town, you have more access for these kids that are in our town. The argument of, yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. I did want to, I am concerned about the growing, about bringing, again, you have people who are coming into the town, you have snippers coming into the town who are now handling all of this stuff. I'm concerned that without a lot of regulation, it's going to get out of control, especially with our kids.
I don't know if I'm missing something here. In your proposed regulations under definitions, you have your retailer, cultivator, micro cultivator. But then, when you go to page 16.4, you only address micro cultivators. Is there I understand the micro and the regular cultivator, the difference is the number of square feet. Is the commission able to restrict retail micro cultivator and allow the cultivator, the larger the square footage?
Oh.
And then just to address, I mean, I used to be a trooper, was a resident trooper in a very rural town that, I mean, that's why I'm against the retail, but let's not fool ourselves about all the illegal grows in the patch hog forest, whether it's two plants or 10 plants. I think that if we regulate it as a manufacturing base, I don't think it would have impact on the day-to-day usage, legal or illegal, within the town of Walton.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
could I just provide a little bit of clarification?
Please.
The cultivators, which is to say larger than micro cultivators, so facilities larger than 15,000 square feet, is the domain of the state of Connecticut. They manage the permitting of those exclusively. So that's we're only controlling micro and down.
Hey, John, quick question. Was there any limit on micro cultivating licenses on or permits in a certain area or town or anything?
Originally, when the law was passed, yes, there was a cap of 1 per 25,000 population of each of the types, which is to say there would be only one of each allowable at any point in Voluntown. But last year, the legislation was tweaked slightly to send that provision back to Department of Consumer Protection. So for the time being, for this very narrow time being, there is not a hard cap, but it is still up to the Department of Consumer Protection how many licenses they choose to issue for a particular town or a particular area. So the answer is there isn't right now, but it's still under the purview of the Department of Consumer Protection. So chances are they are, trying not to overwhelm any community with a bunch of them.
If you have a question, Mark, I need you to come up and speak to this.
I mean, Mark Pelletier, Beach Pond Road. It seems like the concern more is the retail side of things. What you've written up for the 500 foot, or is that by the state? Could you just expand that? So that you're not saying, no, you could never have retail, leaving it open, but say, all right, instead of 500 foot, we're gonna go 1,000 foot. Now you're gonna go, the circle is gonna get very big. You're gonna lock out a lot of the village property that could be used. Now
It's already,
you can't change it.
Or
that state?
When can it be changed?
You were saying they could change
So
things on a
you're
fly.
proposing you're theorizing that you would just increase the separation distances in between two operators?
No, just
No.
from like the church and the school. So say it's 500 feet, we go 1,000 feet. It leaves it that we could still be open to retail in the future. You could just change the reg and drop it back to 500. You open up a little bit of space in the village down the road. I think cultivation is would be good for the town, and the state has, correct me if I'm wrong, there's a lot of regulations on that. It's got to be inside, it's got to be fenced, there's got to be 24-hour surveillance. There's a lot of checks and balances for growers. So that's not so, I mean, a lot of people are concerned about, that coming into the town. Again, we got chickens in here. Really, they don't make a lot of smell. They're pretty good taxpayer, correct me if I'm wrong. That's all. Regulation as far as changing it, as far as if you increase that distance, you'll push it out past the village perimeter. But if you ever want to visit it, you can always go back to that 500 and open up a little space if somebody wanted to open retail or they wanted to look into that. That's all. Just, again, this is just a talk point.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody else?
I'd be curious to hear from the folks in the room. I can't see who's there. For those who are hesitant, is there anything missing from the regs that would make them more comfortable?
Once I close this, we're done. So, go ahead.
The security is vague.
Only because the camera catches you.
Okay,
That's
okay,
the only
no problem.
And we are.
I'm just looking at the security and access. It's kind of vague. What would be required, at one of these facilities? I mean, it's kind of a wide open question.
Quite a bit of regs on phones. What has to happen before that.
Right.
Well, am I gonna have floodlights in my backyard when they open one of these things up? I mean, that kind of thing.
Well, there's John, there's separation on the grow facilities, correct? Yeah.
Right, there will be 1,000-foot separation between the growing facility building itself and any residential structures in the area. And as far as security and access is acknowledgedly vague in the way we regulate it here, but the state, in order to grant licenses, has a whole bunch of security protocols to maintain that the facility is secure and not open to the public, broadly. So in order to get their Department of Consumer Protection license before they would get their local approvals, the security plan would have to be in place, and then the town basically just requires that security plan to be submitted. And then it would be up to the commission, because this is a special exception. It is not an as of right thing. It's a discretionary permit. The commission would have to be convinced that appropriate security measures and access controls would be in place. Otherwise, the commission would be fully within their authority to say no.
I was going to say, maybe explain the special permit process a little bit for folks. So they-
Just going there. Thanks, Julia.
I don't know if you heard.
John, you want to explain the special permit?
Sure. So
Which basically it comes back to a public hearing. So.
right. So a special permit, special exception requires there are two sort of categories of permit classes in the zoning regulations. The first is essentially as of right, where the town establishes a series of yes or no rules. Like you have to have 2 minimum acres for a house. That house needs to be separated from the neighbors by 50 feet on all sides. You need to have stormwater controls in place. And if you check all of those boxes, you will come out the other end with your permit. A special permit or special exception is a more discretionary process, has a higher bar, and requires public input, public notification, and it requires you to demonstrate that your use, whereas it's assumed that a farm use, a residential use is appropriate in those neighborhoods. You basically have to prove for your special exception that the way you conduct your business or your non-residential operation will be in a way that will not negatively impact the neighbors, will not create noise, odor, vibration, radiation, dust, undue traffic. And so the bar is significantly higher, and you basically have to convince the commission, who has the discretion to say no, that you're not creating these negative externalities. And so it's a much broader authority to weigh the facts and weigh the evidence by this commission.
Does that help explain anything to anybody? So even though if listed that this gets passed, nothing says that the micro cultivator is going to come in here and get approved and be right next door yet. It's still got to come back to a public hearing. in the same manner that this is.
And John can answer this too, but I think the state, you have to apply for a permit from the state to do any of this stuff. And the state only gives out a certain number of permits a year, so. It's huge.
How long is the state permitting process?
John.
It took almost 2 years to get underway. I mean, the first facilities just opened, within the last couple of months. The state, I think, approved this over 2 years ago now. And it has been that long for the state to sort of get its permitting path in place and to sort of just roll these out. I assume it'll probably be a little bit smoother now that they have the whole process going and some of these facilities are up and running. So the Department of Consumer Protection can see what's going wrong, where to sort of increase some of their controls or their security measures. But that, yeah, the state has the initial approval process.
And do you know how much it costs still and where that money goes? The permit money?
I don't. It was very. I'd heard it was very expensive. It was over
I
$1 million
heard
just to,
250,000 or something.
like $250,000 just to apply, not to get your permit, just to apply.
And does that money go into a particular fund to help with the concerns about?
Yes, a lot of those funds are being directed into abuse prevention and treatment programs.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions before we close the hearing?
Actually, I do. John, David Neiman in here. Just, can you let the public know, now I know this because I work for the state of Connecticut, that the public, how many plants can each individual house currently grow?
Which is a valid point.
Yeah, most people don't know this.
I don't want to quote it because I thought it was 5 or 6, but I just don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something like 5 or 6 that.
6.
Little house here in Volunteer can grow on their own and we can't regulate.
That we can't regulate for personal use only. They can't sell it. They can't do anything, but it's for personal use. The state has already jammed that down us, just so everybody knows.
And I think it's 6 per person.
Yeah, I think it's 6 per person.
Mm-hmm. I don't grow it, just for the record.
But the 15 other people in your house do, though.
Yeah, right. My cat is.
But that is a valid.
I just wanted to bring that up to everybody, if you didn't know it.
To everybody to know. Go ahead, Tracy. You want to?
Tracy Hanson, Bailey Pond Road. Speaking as a mom, 2 teenagers and a resident of the town. I've talked to my kids about this. They are both in high school, and if they wanted drugs, they could get drugs. Marijuana is not the drug of choice for the high school kids right now. It is the higher stuff, mostly prescription drugs. I'm not worried about, I think these regulations are great. I think they're restrictive enough for us to have control over it. I'm personally more worried about the people that are like already old enough and legal to purchase the marijuana and the edibles, that have kids that aren't being responsible at home with it, than I am with being worried about my kids trying to go to the cannabis store in town and buy stuff. So like, I'm in support of the regulations. I think they give us enough control. I think with the number of feet away from everything, that there's only enough room for one store in town. I've been an advocate for hemp farming since before it was even legalized in the state, so I'm totally fine with the growing part of it too. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
I'm just confused a little bit about the cultivator and micro cultivator. The Consumer Protection monitors the micro cultivator? No, the larger cultivator. And so I guess, for example, like that gentleman is concerned about security and lighting on his property. How would all of that information get gathered here at the town, and how would people in the town know about any violations that were occurring with regard to a micro cultivator, should one come here.
So are you trying to ask who
Would
enforces
you,
or how
Well,
would we know?
How does all that information get gathered? How would, if he's complaining about the lighting, I mean, I guess he would file a complaint, but would it all get gathered somewhere and be available for the public to see that this is building to be a problem, and, or are these guys just gonna come in and do their thing and not report back? And
It should all be monitored, John, should all be monitored at the state level, correct?
well, again, when we're talking about micro cultivators, which is the thing that the town would have control of, the initial application would be submitted with all of those details, with, you know, where the building is going, where the parking is going, where the lighting is, what the lighting details are. And when should the town approve that, should planning and zoning approve that plan, those details would be locked in. And then it would become a question of complaint and response. So if, and by the way, during the public hearing process, or in advance of the public hearing process, all of the neighbors of that applicant property would be notified of the proposed use, as well as all of those details like parking, lighting, odor control, all of that stuff. So after all that process, it got approved, that would be the standard that the micro cultivator would be held to. And if for some reason they, like, their odor control wasn't functioning properly, or they put a bunch of floodlights in the wrong place, or shined them on the neighbors inappropriately, or, you know, heck, if the workers were just blasting their music in a way that was disturbing to the neighbors, then that becomes an enforcement matter, and the zoning enforcement officer would compare the actual behavior or the actual performance of the facility with what was promised and approved. And if there was the discrepancy, then the town would have the authority to impose fines, or in fact pull their permit.
okay, so it'd be like a building permit violation.
It's you know, it's how we handle, yeah, zoning and code violations.
It's even more than that, because they can take away their special permit. They can
Right.
take away their right to that use forever. You know, you can revoke the special permit after a hearing and all that.
Come on.
So the town would actually have the ability to revoke the permit if they weren't in compliance?
Yes, as would the state,
Okay.
if it was a serious enough issue.
And then when they're not in compliance with the state law, how would we know about that?
I think it depends on the element that we're talking about. You compare it to, say, for instance, if a package store was selling liquor to minors, that's, you know, that's a state enforcement matter, and Department of Consumer Protection would have their investigation. That's not necessarily.
You have to file for Freedom of Information Act to know how many times that's happened for that particular permit.
Who would?
Like if a resident wanted to know how many times a package store was in violation of selling to minors.
Yeah.
They would probably have to pull a Freedom of Information Act to find out how many times over the course of that permit.
Okay.
I'm just saying it gets kind of complicated. And I would imagine it'd be exponentially more complicated with this type of permit.
I think, and it depends on what the category of non-compliance or violation was. Yeah, I mean, but various departments, whether it's the local zoning office or the Department of Consumer Protection or the state trooper, all have their areas of jurisdiction and conduct their investigations and penalty phases per what is authorized to them. I as a zoning officer, and I'm not the Voluntown zoning officer, but I am for other towns, you know, I'm not authorized to bust someone for underage package store sales. That's not a law that I enforce. But if they are creating some sort of odor problem, or you know, shining their lights in the neighbors, that is a zoning violation. And so it's really the nature of the concern or the nature of the violation would tell you what path we need to take for enforcement.
Right, so if a facility's not in compliance, then it becomes an issue for a commission that's formed in Hartford, maybe by the governor. In the case of alcohol, that would be the liquor commission. So they would decide, basically if that business should keep going, what the fines are, that type of thing.
If that was the nature of the violation, yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, if we had enough, for instance, if we had, repeated noise or odor or lighting violations, something that would fall into the purview of zoning, it is something that we would certainly have the ability as part of our enforcement process to report up to the state to say that this permittee is not acting in good faith and is not being an appropriate, holder of the state license any more than they are as an appropriate holder of a local license. So as part of our local enforcement process, we could certainly report it up the chain.
Right, but then it becomes an issue for somebody in Hartford to decide what's good for what's going on in Volunteer.
I think it just increases the amount of leverage, because again, the goal of enforcement is to ensure following the rules. And if you have increased leverage by having not only local, but also state authorities threatening to pull your license, you tend to get people's attention in a greater way. But enforcement is not a perfect thing.
No, understood. But there again, it does become a matter for somebody else that doesn't even live here, whether they're going to continue to allow that permit to function if they're in non-compliance. And a lot of times what I've seen happen is I've just seen the state look at the revenue through the sales tax or whatever through alcohol, and they put that over whether it's good for what's going on in the community. So that's...
But again, if it's a zoning violation, the town can take away their permit. The town can say.
That's what's unique about this particular permit. But I've said my piece on this one, so I'll just sit down now. Thank you.
And I think Rhode Island's made it legal and has places people can buy it recreationally already, so. Not 100% sure, but yeah. Yeah. And Massachusetts, yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything to say before we close the public hearing? Going once, going twice. Okay, so we want to make a motion to close the public hearing. No.
Public hearing.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Alright, we need to do additions to the agenda, wasn't on here. The approval of minutes wasn't on our agenda. And we need to talk about the resignation or the possibility of our secretary.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from February.
For Adam. Or no,
No, we need to add,
we need Adam.
a motion to add the
Add
approval
to
of
the
February
agenda.
minutes.
Yep, under new business
Under
and
new
then talk about sewer. All right. So first would be approval of the minutes. Someone want to make a motion to approve February minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from February.
You'll second that? Sure. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? No. Motion carried. So it comes back to the recreational cannabis regulation. So let's open it for discussion. The old business. Where does everybody feel? And
So
I mean, it's something, well, you have the numbers of what
Yeah.
everything was.
So I was writing down what everybody said here. We've already gotten the tallies from the survey we did. Now tonight, for people who spoke, yay to growing, having growers in town, it was 7 yays. Because I took each person who spoke, whether they wanted a yay for growing, a yay for selling, a nay for growing, a nay for selling. So it's 7 yays on growing, 5 yays on selling. Now on the nays, it was 4 nays on the growing and 6 nays on the selling.
That one definitely seems to be, more-
Yeah, the selling's-
Overall.
So just to let everybody know.
So there's two concerns about. Well, I have two concerns as far as. I did like the recommendation of maybe increasing that.
Yeah.
That number, and then we wouldn't have to go back to another public hearing. Because we'd be increasing the reg, correct, making it more stringent. John? We could modify the distance.
Right, of the things that you discussed that could be sort of modified on the fly,
Okay.
that the separation distances is something that could be increased, certainly.
Between the church, school.
Right,
Church.
and I don't know that, I think 1,000 is a lot. I don't. Who knows what is gonna come out of this?
Nothing like that.
I'm against selling it. I'll say that right up front. I mean, Voluntown is a small town of family. We have to remember that. I know a lot of people are fortunate enough to work from their home, but this is a family town. And I don't think we need or we want what's going to come with selling it in Voluntown.
You do have to remember the survey results too. I don't know if there's numbers attached to the responses there. Who was yay, who was nay?
Yeah, right.
It was
and
about 70%.
It was
yay.
about 70% yay. If you put the maybes or regulated as. And I have said this before, I feel like you can take the regulate as a yay or as a nay, depending upon how the reg is written.
Me personally, working the job I do, I've built like 5 of these places between Connecticut and Massachusetts, Pure Leaf, up in, side of Hartford, you name it. I don't see where in any way, shape or form where a retail location wants to
Come here.
Their populace of 2,000 people.
Yeah.
You might find one that does Voluntown, Lisbon, Griswold, Plainfield, they're gonna find a location. They're just not gonna pop with it. They gotta pay for permits and they're not gonna pop up everywhere.
They won't come here.
Yeah. The farm part,
Yeah.
It's a possibility.
the one that we can't control with the state, I wouldn't be surprised if we see that one.
So, John, if we were to turn down the selling portion of this, would we have to rewrite the reg?
Well, what you would do would be, we'd basically eliminate all of 8.16.3, all of it, delete it, and then just convert 8.16.4 to be 8.16.3, and basically just sort of slide up the directory.
But we need to go back to a public hearing.
No,
Well, you do to prohibit the use.
you would, yeah. So what you could do tonight would just be to eliminate this allowance and regulation. Then you would, and so then for some window of a month or two, it would be basically unregulated or regulated as any other retail use. And then
Look it down later.
Yeah.
and then you could later go ahead and prohibit proactively, affirmatively prohibit, if you want to put it that way.
Places go in and see what happens and then learn from them. If you think that
Right.
we need
And I think 1,000 feet is too much. Like, I think if we went to 600 or 800, I mean, that puts you. Yeah. I mean, well, you don't want to, there is retail space down the road.
Don't
That's-
control your map.
What?
Don't control your map.
Yeah. John, could you pull up the map and like do different circles on the map from,
St. Thomas is probably the closest to that.
yeah, and I agree with you.
Yeah.
I
Also
go off
eliminated
this.
almost all that area going up 49 and almost took all that out.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
which is already owned and has houses going on it, so.
Yeah, no, I agree with that statement.
And then you run a risk of, if you do that second public hearing, let's say, and now overwhelmingly all the people that responded to that survey come in and convince you that you should have it. Here's your chance to do it in a way that you feel safeguards enough things.
Yep, I agree with you.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, you wanted me to say, for instance, put 1,000 foot around the school?
No, I wouldn't go to the school. I would go to the church.
St. Thomas Church.
Yep, which is, no, not that one, the next one over, the little one there. Yep, it's that one.
Is that right?
No, it's not.
Go to all the churches.
Yeah, because there's one down on that edge too.
This is the church.
That's the one.
That's the church. Okay.
Yep, and do 6 and do 700, just to see the differences.
There's 6.
Oh, wow. All right, and then
There's 7. Nope, not. It's basically the same because these parcels over to the east are so big.
okay. And then just for giggles, do 1,000, see what it is.
Good catch.
No change because again, you're still not hitting this next level. The parcel next to Denison Brook there.
Yeah, we got the parcel on the other side, the big parcel. Now, where's that church by the, right as you come into town?
It still doesn't affect the village.
No, the other one.
As I said, this is the church right here, right?
I think
Yeah.
so.
I don't get that. How come it doesn't turn that way?
So you pick up the state forest.
Yeah,
So
no
that's-
sales in the forest. All right, so if you look at that 500, is that 500 or 1,000?
That's 1,000 right now.
If you put it on 500 and you put the other church on 500, don't you just eliminate that whole zone?
Well, with the school on the top part of the map, yeah.
Yeah,
you
you're pretty
kill-
much gonna get rid of that whole,
Right.
that whole end of, this whole end of.
This whole, basically almost entirely to Denison Brook.
Yeah,
Would
so you
be-
have in the house, right, go down with your cursor, those are all houses, right? Where you are now, down
Yeah,
lower?
down here, this is
No,
Willow-
down. Where it
Down
says
here.
0300, 0200, 0100.
Oh, yeah. Those are all houses. This is on Willow Bridge Ave.
So if you put both of those 500s on, I'm not sure what you'd have left.
So the church basically takes you to Gate Street, more or less. The school
Takes you all the way over to,
takes you back to the other
45.
side of Gate Street.
I think 500 may be okay.
With the 2 500s or the 3 500s, if you put the school in there, is there even any commercial properties in that area then left?
Not
That's
in the, then you'd basically be dealing with the commercial overlay.
Yeah.
so you could change your reg to,
Even at 1,000, it doesn't take out
Right.
Riverside.
Yeah.
That's
I
what
mean, it looks like you only have, because I remember when we did that study of like what these parcels were, remember it was a gravel bank, some open space. The only commercial spot was, where the pizza place is, Riverside Plaza.
Hmm.
And then whatever that's a cemetery on the other side. There wasn't anything really available.
No, you've got the pool place, you've got the village. Yeah.
But that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
I mean, these other places aren't, that other one's a church too, isn't it? 04, what's 45?
It doesn't.
What's the distance to a house? Because you do have a house.
500.
No, there's not the house distance is for micro cultivators.
Okay.
Sorry,
What's
Juliet, which one are you saying?
Corner there,
1,000 for growing, 500 for
Yeah.
retail.
across the street.
What now?
Well, you've got Brown's house, and then there's one across the
There's
street.
one house right there too.
The one that says 45-00, the corner of Shetucket and Econk on the other side of,
4500.
And then right across the other side of the brook too.
Yeah, you got one right across from Bronson's. Good.
what is that?
Use description is service center, so it's an old garage.
All right, so I mean, there's I suppose a possible. So you've got like 2 spots.
There's a house, there's a
Yeah.
house next to
Right
the.
in front of the recycle,
Right,
like the material
Yeah,
recycle place.
yeah.
Right before the brook.
The town's already squawking about all this traffic that they have. They're gonna be bringing in a ton more.
I don't think it's proven to do that, but
It will.
I mean, John, do you have any data on the Montville place of massive traffic or?
I do not, one way or the other. But my general sense of the scale of something like this is it's serving the local population. So if someone's out and about in their car, it's another one of the errands that they're going to be running in the course of the day.
Well, the one
Especially as more and more come around.
at 9 places that opened up legally, they were all state controlled medical marijuana places that went to adult use. They figured by the end of the year, there'll be 100 additional places.
Right.
So the traffic that went to Montville this week isn't all gonna go to Montville by December.
You're right.
I think it really is in many ways, I think, analogous to package stores, which are, regulated there in terms of their numbers by the state.
And not huge
It's,
traffic.
there's exactly one package store in Voluntown. And I would, I'm not making a direct comparison, but I don't think that that's generating a significant amount of traffic from people coming into town for the purpose of using that package store.
So let me ask you this, is there any advantage to moving it from 500 to 1,000? And I don't think there really is the way that everything's in down.
Not the way the layout is.
No, I think we're good. I think the 500 is good.
I think you're gonna be looking at maybe 2-3 places possible.
Well, I don't even think the state will let us have more than one, correct, John? Under
Right,
the-
of even
Current.
potential.
Right. It's not clear at this point, but I think it's unlikely.
Well, if we have one, the 500 radius around that one's gonna kick.
I hate to say it, if there's a
Yeah,
restaurant.
right.
Put one, and they don't meet all the little things that they need to meet with odor control and everything else. I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah.
You're not giving a lot of
No,
options.
I don't,
You're
yeah,
pushing them out.
I think the 500, I think the 500 is okay.
1,000 didn't change.
And 1,000 didn't really change anything.
You already are effectively preventing retail.
Correct.
I mean,
In
through
the
your-
actual village
village,
district,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like grocery stores. If you don't have if the market analysis doesn't show that you're gonna have enough density in the area or support in the area to use it, they're not gonna come. The amount that it costs to, get one of these going is gonna be prohibitive if they can't, if there's no traffic for it, nobody to visit it.
Possibly using it. But, I mean, that's
That's
a
what people
far
do when they
stretch.
go to
That's-
Massachusetts
right,
before it became legal here.
Right,
So
exactly. Exactly.
we already have the camping traffic.
Right. Might as well get sales tax from them.
Yeah.
I mean, here we are second guessing what was theoretically written. And yes, we had some nays to,
We got to get your sample size.
yeah, the question becomes, is it regulated enough? Or what?
Well, with these regulations being put into place too, that just allows them to be changed or added to later on. So
Correct,
they're just not even in place right now.
correct.
Hey, John, can you go from setting regulations for this to absolutely abstaining from any kind of marijuana thing down the road? Or once you accept it and put regulations in, you can't?
No, you could go back and, I mean, yeah, no, you could reverse yourself at some point in the future and go ahead and ban it, or, when the 5 of you, 6 of you, 7 of you are not commissioners anymore, and you have a new commission, they want to do something different, it's up to them. But the one thing you can't do at this point is, if you allow this right now, someone comes in, you approve them, and then you disallow it at some point later, that one you allowed can remain.
I just didn't know if it was you have to make a decision and that's
Oh,
it.
no, this is,
Well, I mean,
this is a use that the state is allowing municipalities to regulate. And so you can do it.
let's say somebody goes in, or somebody brings us an application. We go to public hearing with it, and everybody's against it. Do we have to vote for it, even though it meets the regulations?
If it is your finding that it does meet every element of the regulations, then you really ought to approve it. But I think, you would be wise to listen to the specific concerns of the neighbors or whomever who are challenging this particular application for a particular site. If they are citing something that leads you to believe that there would be some public health, safety, welfare, traffic, lighting, noise, odor, or other concern, then chances are you found something within the regulations they don't. But again, you're correct in the underlying assumption of your question that even if everyone hates it, if it meets the regs, should it be approved? The answer is yes, but hopefully people hate it, not just because they hate it, but they hate it because it poses some actual public health threat.
Okay. So I mean, it's still. I think we're regulating it to the point that we need to regulate it, and then it becomes, if something comes before us,
Pay attention to the other towns.
yeah, I mean, we can always modify this later too.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any comments to say on it? I mean, and this is ultimately all of our decisions. I mean, you can speak. This is a free, you are a member of this board. Well, I mean, the citizen part is all done. Juliet's speaking, I mean, you can speak on this. Just, you can't vote on it.
I just don't know enough what it's gonna bring in. I mean, there was great points made on both sides to.
I don't think any of us know what way this can go, but I think this is a good start.
Now, a lot of these towns that have this, that you said that you built for and stuff like that, do
The
they
ones
have?
I've dealt with would be
Yes.
the ones that we have no control over at all. They're monsters.
Okay.
Is that 3% going to give us enough money so that we can have a resident trooper here?
What makes you think
town?
you need one?
That was my next thing, what I was gonna say, they know that there's no police officers in this town.
That's right.
Big jump to come here.
Oh, but they know it's voluntary. They might be
It's,
better off with cops.
The one that we have no control over, we have no control over, and that's the big one. And that's the company that has the money for the permit and will buy the 100-acre plot and they'll drop it, and we can all just sit here and complain that we can't do a thing about it.
I would note at this time, it's my understanding that most of, if not all of the larger cultivator licenses, there's going to be an extremely small number of those. And a lot of those have already been given to municipalities during the medical marijuana round. So for instance, there's a big cultivator in Portland, and I think there was one in Berlin or Bristol. There, so some of the bigger cultivators have already been granted their licenses.
Well, they look at traffic patterns and trucking and everything else too. They need to move their
I
stuff.
was gonna
That's
say,
why the one on the other
we're
side.
on the edge of
Hartford,
the
yeah,
state too. We're not in the
Yeah.
center of the state where they can distribute it.
we have great farmland, it's not great location.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean,
The
if
security.
we
in
all
those
had a
places,
crystal
though,
ball, it would be perfect to rate, to get something. But
The security that.
You
those
gotta
places
remember
over there
that-
are crazy.
this was passed down from the state to us to make, do we want to be in? Do we want to be out?
Or
You
let
know,
them run it.
Right, or let them run it. Who
Take
wants
one
to?
things wonderfully.
Yeah, the state, we all know how the state.
Yeah.
But. And then the feedback from the taxpayers, whether they received their survey or they didn't, but we got a large response out of that.
72%.
Yeah. So
And then
with
even-
that, that's why we came up with these regs. And along the whole route of all this thing, any of those people could have come in and voiced their opinion at any point. Nobody chose to come until tonight. And they all have valid points. But I don't think any of us really know what's gonna come of it.
And I think Montville's a good resource. I mean, being a planner in this region, I mean, I have not heard anything negative. 'cause I
Montville
was
has a
paying
large,
attention.
Montville has a large police force, and where they are, it's near the prison, and it's pretty secure.
But the
One person,
facility itself hasn't had, you know, they're not reporting an increase in crime or something like that. But I mean, I get the concerns too, but I think it's like a lot of things that are new and different that people are afraid, but they don't turn out to be anything, you know, outrageous. And like you said, if for some reason you get one in, because that's all you would ever get, I'm sure, and it's just horribly wrong, you can decide to ban that use, and then that use that's grandfathered can't expand or get bigger. I mean, it's going to be what it is, and you can, you know, deal with the consequences from there. But I think you'd be more likely to get people growing, not selling right here.
That goes back to the survey, and that's the path we went down, so it's
Right.
not now, it's
that's what I mean. And this goes back
months.
a year, over a year, you know? Did we sit on it a little bit? We did.
For a year.
But we've gone through the steps. The question becomes, do we feel that this meets the criteria of what everybody was saying here? And I think that 500 feet takes out anything that's really a question.
But the 1,000-foot didn't push out.
It really didn't push it out. I mean, you'd have to push it out to 10,000 feet, probably. Do we want to do that?
Might as well say no with them.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, it's cleaner to prohibit it then.
No, I think the 500 foot's good. 1,000-foot on the micro.
And that's not guaranteeing that somebody's gonna come in here and get a permit to do this.
They gotta get a license and the land.
Yeah,
and the-
I mean, there's a lot of hoops that gotta get jumped through before we see a piece down here and down.
See, micro can get out here.
This isn't the last say that the taxpayers have to say on this either.
If I might, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, John, please.
you know, not to put my thumb on the scale on this, but I think you're all very correct in that you don't really know what's coming down the pike in terms of applications or users. But these regulations and your special exception regulations in general are meant to be a high bar. And so if you adopt this and then ultimately authorize a retailer to go into, you know, a vacant spot at the Riverfront Plaza, for instance, and it becomes a problem with the public, with the way that it's run and maintained, chances are very good that it is in some violation of some element of the special permit criteria, that it is creating noise, odor, you know,
Traffic.
you know, some sort of other public nuisance or public safety problem that would be an enforceable element. You know, if they do everything that you and abide by everything that you are holding them to in the course of your approval, they're, you know, those regulations are designed that it should not be a problem.
I think
could
you're
make
gonna
it
have
out.
summer people, a lot of summer people that come in and go down to Beach Pond. I think you're gonna have them going up there buying pot or whatever they buy. And then they're gonna go out on the boats, and I think there's gonna be problems.
So that's a
what I
problem of the user. That's not a problem of the.
I
of
know,
the
but
facility.
we're inviting it. We are inviting it.
The state
That's
has
supposed to be
already-
a zoning
we-
regulate
The
behavior.
that
state is
and-
way ahead of you on that. The state has already allowed it.
You know, they could buy it and Grizzle on their way in.
Well,
Yeah,
Grizzle
I mean,
banned it
No, I'm just
altogether,
saying,
but
like Norwich, pick
Yeah.
your spot. They
Yeah,
can bring
no.
it with them.
they can get it
People
off
are
it's here in town
Yeah.
too, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, that's,
People who smoke, and they either operate a boat or a car or whatever, and that's a policing problem, not a zoning problem.
And we don't have a police.
Well,
We don't have
becomes
police.
a
That's the
policing
problem
problem.
here.
It's still not a zoning, it's not within your purview. I think it's funny that the typo in here, the signage ordinance, the number was, in my copy said 420. I got a chuckle out of that.
It was section 420. That was, I think, deliberate. Someone had a sense of humor at the state.
Yeah, I guess so.
so right now it's open for discussion. If somebody wants to vote on it, make a motion.
I'm gonna make a motion to approve the amendments to the zoning regulation 8.16 regarding recreational cannabis facilities as written.
As approved by the,
Board and.
well, the one that came from the attorney.
As modified by Rich Roberts.
Okay, so there's been a motion made. Need a second.
I'll second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Anybody else? Good.
Yes.
Let's do a vote. And I think we should go around. I'll say yes.
Yes.
Well, you can't vote. I know. You can't vote.
I seconded it. And I'm more leaning towards the grower than the retail. But these regulations do back up keeping it out of the center of town. So, and we can always change it. So I will vote yes.
Yeah, and I agree with your statements as well. Pat, comes down to you.
Nay.
Okay. So it's 3-2. Does this have to pass more than a certain percentage?
No, simple majority.
Simple majority, that's what I thought.
So I'm sorry, was the vote 3 in favor, 2 opposed?
3 in favor, 2 opposed.
The motion carries.
Motion carries, correct. Correct.
And with an effective date of April 1, when the moratorium expires?
That would be, yeah, because we gotta get notice of decision and view. Does that give you enough time?
Yeah,
Because
I'll
we have
send
to
it.
have what, 14 days of appeal? John?
It's 15 days following publication of decision.
Okay. So we
There's
got
time.
that.
So yeah, so if we get it published in the next week, April would be right.
Is that possible?
Yeah, John, I'll send you proof tomorrow.
Okay.
But
Thanks,
don't do it
Sue.
April 1st. Somebody might think it's a joke.
Well. All right. Zoning regulation update. You guys want to do that tonight? You want to table it? We still have some other business to take care of. It is 20 minutes. to-
I've been making progress adjusting stuff, but there's nothing really specific to report on at this point.
Let's table that for next month.
You need a motion.
Correspondence, which was.
You should have a motion for that.
No, you don't.
No? You can just table it.
I've given you my report. We're done.
Done.
CEO report is not on here either. Pete, is he still on? Pete's
No, he
gone.
left.
It's gone.
Thank God. He decided to leave. Correspondence. So Sue is moving on to greener pastures. Sue has offered to, she's staying on. I guess I shouldn't use the name, but the secretary has offered to stay on and train somebody, or we could even just use this secretary to do all of our stuff as well. Things have been working very smoothly. Sorry to see her move along.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And congratulations.
Yes. How does the board want to proceed? I know.
What were the options?
What?
I didn't hear. What were the options? I didn't hear you.
Not letting her go would be number one.
Oh, okay.
Not letting our secretary go. I gotta be careful about this. And we have started
the town.
Town has started, and I have sat in on interviews, looking for a replacement.
For, not only for this and the building and land use
And
office.
in the office. So,
So what are we actually voting on?
well, we need this is not just my decision.
No,
Yeah,
but
this
what
is,
are we, I mean, she's gonna do it in the meantime or not?
she's
do it in the
definitely gonna,
meantime?
no, she's definitely
Okay.
gonna do it in the meantime. I mean, she asked me whether we wanted her to stay on, and I said, please, because we're in the middle of everything.
Oh, you mean beyond hiring somebody else for the land?
Yes, yes, so, I mean, do we wanna use our secretary or, to do all of our stuff, or do we transition to the same land use person? Or do we try it out and make a decision down the road?
Well, seeing how we have the selectmen here,
Go right ahead, you ask.
What do you want?
well, Tracy, is the selectman's office hiring a new position? I saw advertised.
We are interviewing,
Okay.
and it's because the land use office secretary is very limited at limited hours. It works better to hire someone to include the secretary for all the zoning offices with the secretary for the building and land use. It makes it a better package to get someone.
More hours.
So
Yeah.
it's more hours and it's
And
I mean,
it's really hard to hire
and
part-time.
Tracy, when you guys are doing the interviews, are you basically asking them about their, ability to cover meetings and do minutes and stuff?
Oh, that's the main thing we've been focusing on is their skills, because they need to be able to pick up the open gov for the
Most
land use
everything
What
office
about their availability?
and their
Like
availability.
working a day job and then coming back at
Yeah,
7 o'clock?
correct.
Yep,
Yeah,
and that's what
you
we've
tell
been
them.
making sure that they understand that there's day hours and night hours, and the night hours, even though they're for wetlands and for zoning, they're pretty much by schedule. There could be special meetings, there could be public hearings, there could be other things, and so they're clear on that too. And we are making sure they have computer skills and can do minutes and a Zoom
I
and.
mean, but how long realistically, if somebody was hired, are they even capable of doing what she's doing right now?
Never.
I found a box.
Yes. It's definitely gonna be a transition, and I don't know.
So it's gonna take months.
Oh, God.
So we
So I don't think it'll take that long. We've already started interviewing. We've had really good people so far.
Right, but as far as training, because we only have a meeting once a month.
Yeah, she'll be
So-
training for the minutes, but she can go off of the videos too. And
It's gonna be a little bit, I agree with you,
Yeah.
I agree with your statement, it's not gonna be
It's not going
overnight,
anywhere.
it's not gonna be overnight.
Yeah, well, we're all here to help, so I mean, it's fine.
I mean, would you like to continue doing just this? Or would you like us to find a
Well, let's see what happens.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Let's just see what happens.
she doesn't wanna ditch on us, is what she said to me, so.
Well, yeah, I don't wanna, well, I
She doesn't
don't
wanna
wanna
hang us
leave
out to
anybody
dry.
empty-handed. I'm still
Yeah.
coming on Tuesday and Thursday.
Yeah.
Huh?
You don't want to ditch us, but you want to get the heck out of here.
Well, yeah,
Listen, I'm sorry it's taken.
no, that's all right.
I think her intent is to leave us in good hands, but the operational part of that is to leave us.
Right,
Yeah.
yes,
Right, to make it an attractive position for someone else too.
so that's what's going on, I found out, 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago? It was after the
right
last,
after the last
it was
meeting.
after the last meeting. But really, it's not my decision, it's the board's decision, so.
Definitely.
Sue, if I could, I'd give you the raise that you need.
Thank you, Pat.
Yes, I told you that a long time ago. You don't get paid enough.
You're on TV.
What are we
So-
doing on? Nothing, we don't have to, right?
We really don't, but I mean, I just want everybody to be aware of what's going
So, yeah, right now we need her there.
Well, yeah, right now we need Sue back. So,
Well, I'd like to say thank you for hanging
Yes.
on.
yes, thank you.
You obviously
Yeah.
have, thank you for helping us out in the town, because just ditching us would have been horrible for me, because technically I'm the secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Personally, really appreciate it.
Flowers coming tomorrow.
There you go, David. Your next job.
Okay. Any other discussion this evening? Okay, next is,
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
45.
Juliet can't.
What?
Well, it's adjournment.
Yeah.
Voting, an application.
Someone make a motion.
Someone's gonna come back and challenge your adjournment.
To adjourn. I'll second that. Okay.
Legally, she can't.
Your meeting's never over. The right person.
All right. You what?
All right.
Correct.
Scott,
Yes.
good job.
Well, thank you. You went way more in depth than I thought. Actually, that should have been presented to you. But I just wanted to make clear that this didn't come from our decision. This came from the cert.
That was abrupt.
Oh, Sue bailed on him.
Wow.
All right.
Anybody can make a motion to adjourn, can't they? It's not an application.
I think you're probably technically, if you're not seated, you don't get any formal duties, but
Well, you get to
I
talk
would've put
about
yeah.
membership or voting on elected officers. I mean, to me, it's all the same.
I would have put it in the minutes, frankly, but yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's see.
All right.